Now, EditPoly has a lot of very useful editing tools, and we're going to be taking a look at a lot of these in the next 3 exercises. However, I just want to expose you to where they are and how they're located so that if you want to play around a little bit, feel free to do so. And also, when we get to the lessons, you know exactly where to look. So if we go into vertex mode, on the right-hand side here, you can see that we have edit vertices and edit geometry. This is where the majority of your features or your editing functions are located. So for example, if we select a single vertex and we go to the extrude button here, we click on it, it turns yellow, let us know that we're in the extrude mode. We move our cursor over the vertex and you can tell that the cursor changes. We can now drag the mouse up to define an extrusion of that vertex. We can drag the mouse left or right to define the base of that extrusion. And so this is a very quick way to create little spikes or horns or whatever you happen to need. And so you can actually do it for multiple objects as well. So drag up and out. And I actually still had this one selected over there. That's why it did what it did. So you have other options such as chamfer. We can click on chamfer and drag it out, drag it in, whatever you happen to need. Now you'll notice that there are little boxes next to many of these little icons. The button with the name on it is the mode, meaning that you switch into that mode and then you click and drag. It's kind of like an interactive mode. And you can click and drag right in your viewport to define the settings. However, the little button to the right of that brings up a little dialog box that gives you the settings and sometimes a few more settings of the editing effect. So in this case, we can put in exact numerical values for this particular operation. So we put in, say, 6 inches. We can also click on open, which isn't available if you click on just regular chamfer. What this does is it opens up or deletes the polygon right in the middle there. Now where this really becomes useful is with weld. Now if we select 2 vertices and we click on weld, nothing's happening. However, if we click on the settings, we'll notice that we actually have a weld threshold here. And what welding does is it takes 2 vertices and kind of attaches them together or merges them into one vertex. And actually it can be used on multiple vertices. I mean, it can as many as you want. But it will only weld together adjacent vertices, or basically vertices that share a common edge. Now in this case, the threshold defines basically how far do vertices have to be before they are collapsed. So if I type in, say, 1 foot, okay, it immediately attaches those two together, collapses those two together. As I drag it down, you'll notice right around 7 inches, they no longer collapse because this distance between them is greater than 7 inches. And so we just need to often increase this threshold to find a nice compromise of what we're trying to do here. Because if you select too many objects or too many vertices and you set too high of a value, notice what happens. You get a very extreme effect. So just be careful with what you're using and just choose the setting that's necessary here. One of the nice things to know whether or not your weld is actually doing anything is to look at the before and after. This tells you how many vertices were there before you applied weld and how many after. Okay, let's hit cancel. Now in addition to that, we have like target weld, which is very similar to weld, but you just basically click and drag from one vertex to the next and it welds them together. You also have such things as connect. Connect will create an edge between any 2 vertices as long as they are on the same face. So if I click on connect, it creates a nice edge between those. However, if I select that one and that one very far apart, click on connect, nothing happens. Same holds true for weld. If I go ahead and bump this way up, you can see that even at 15 feet, which is bigger than this entire plane, it is not welding those together because they do not share a common edge. Now, one other thing to watch out for before I move on to a couple very quick edge and polygon tools is working with the settings dialog box. Now, the settings dialog box can be a little tricky sometimes, and sometimes you can get into some bizarre behavior. Say, for example, I go ahead and just create an extrusion height and an extrusion width. Again, we got to these settings just by clicking on the little button next to extrude. You'll notice down here at the bottom we have apply and OK. Now what's the difference? Well, OK is whenever you're done with the settings after this application. So for example, if this is the only spike I want to apply in this case, I don't want to keep on extruding it up and up and up or selecting other vertices, I would click OK. This finalizes it and burns it in. However, if I hit undo, you can see that I can select multiple vertices at any time once this settings dialog box is open. If we go back to our example here and I click on apply, notice that it applied that original extrusion and then applied another one directly after that. Because what it did was it ended up taking this selection and applying the extrude effect again. So we can click on apply, extrudes it, do OK, and that confirms it. Another such option is if we say click on apply and then hit cancel. That will do only one application, but you have to be a little bit careful with how you use this. Typically, I just end up using OK, unless I know I want to extrude over and over and over again or do some other kind of effect. Weld is a great example of when you would use apply. Say I select these vertices, drag up my threshold, click apply. That's great. Now I go over and select a couple other faces, and let's say these in the corner. Drag it up a little bit, click apply. And so this allows you to keep this dialog box open and just keep working if you plan on doing the same effects over and over and over again. Okay, now let's take a really quick look at some edge and polygon methods. Now we're going to be using these in just a minute on real objects, but I want to expose you to the controls first so you know where they are, and also just to see it on a very simple example here. So before we do that, I'm just going to delete the EditPoly modifier with a little can here and apply a new one. Go over into polygon mode just to have a clean slate here. Now within here we have many more options underneath edit polygons. We have extrude, which works much in the same way. You can extrude face up or extrude face down. You can do such things as inset, which is basically a face within a face. And it actually works based off your selection. So if I have multiple objects selected and I click on extrude, so drag it up, it does it as one big block. We have a couple other options here, which we'll go over a little bit later, which can break these objects up into individual extrusions. Same holds true for inset. If we click on the inset settings and increase that, you can see it creates a nice inset polygon here. If we do by polygon, it does each one individually. We have such things as bevel, which is very similar to extrude, but it gives you the option of tapering it at the same time. So here I can just bring it in. And in this case, we can choose by polygon, and it does each one individually. Now there are many other options here, and we're not going to go into all of them right now, but just know that there are many things here to play with. Another such example is the edge. You can select one edge and say click on ring to select all the edges that are parallel to it. We can now go in here and click on connect. We can specify how many times it's connected. We can specify how wide apart those connections are. We can also slide those two connections one way or the other. Very useful for adding detail to your objects. Another such example of using our tools is you can end up doing loop, then do a ring. You can go down into chamfer and spread those out. You can add additional faces in the middle or additional segments, or you can open it up. Quick way to break up your object. Okay, so now that we've seen the very basics of EditPoly, let's see how we can actually use it by cleaning up one of our existing objects, namely the manhole cover.